You can feel it, even if you can't explain it. A pressure in the air, like the moment before a storm. It's not just the world changing, it's the stage beneath the world itself. The old stories are cracking. The symbols you thought you understood are turning inside out. And deep in the quiet chambers of your spirit, there is a knowing that this isn't random, that something vast is shifting. Two great rivers of time are colliding. One, flowing from the age of Pisces, 2,000 years of faith, sacrifice and control. The other, rushing from the horizon of Aquarius, the promise of liberation, innovation and truth. But these rivers do not merge peacefully. They crash, they churn, they fight for the shape of the ocean to come. And you are standing in the middle. The ancients spoke of the ages not as ideas, but as living beings. Each one with a personality, a heartbeat, a soul. They taught that to be born in a certain age was to be woven into its song, whether you recognized it or not. And now we are living in the rarest of moments, the passing of the torch from one cosmic singer to another. For over 2 millennia, the age of Pisces has been our guiding current. It carried the myths of saviors, the call to believe in the unseen, and the deep waters of empathy and surrender. Its light inspired saints, healers, and poets. But its shadow empowered deceivers, empires, and the chains of blind faith. Now, just beyond the veil, the age of Aquarius rises like a silver dawn. It speaks the language of networks, of shared vision, of awakening the mind as much as the heart. Its gifts are knowledge without borders, unity without dogma, and truth without permission. Yet its shadow is no less dangerous. The coldness of machine logic, the seduction of control disguised as progress, the fracture of human connection under the weight of speed. We are not simply moving from one age to another. We are living the collision. Like tectonic plates grinding under the earth, this meeting shakes the surface of everything we know. Institutions crumble because they were built for the old age. Ideas collapse because they cannot survive the new frequency. And inside us, the same fault lines are breaking open, between the parts of us still bound to Pisces and the parts being pulled toward Aquarius. The ancients warned that these times would feel like madness. Prophets across cultures described them as birth pains, when the old must shatter so the new can breathe. And here is the great paradox. You are not only witnessing this shift, you are the shift. Every choice you make, every truth you speak or hide, feeds one current or the other. The hidden battle for your soul is not fought on some distant field. It is here, in your thoughts, in your heart, in the quiet spaces where no one else sees. And as the ages wrestle for the throne, the question is not simply which one will win. It is, which one will you serve? The age of Pisces began long before anyone called it by that name, emerging quietly in the turning of the great astrological wheel. Its birth is marked in the heavens by the slow procession of the equinoxes, a vast celestial clock in which the Earth's axis wobbles over a cycle of roughly 25,920 years. Every 2,160 years or so, the sun rises on the spring equinox in a new constellation. Around the first centuries BCE, that rising point shifted into Pisces, the sign of the fish, and with it, a new chapter of human consciousness began. To the astrologers of antiquity, this was no mere astronomical coincidence. The fish was an ancient symbol of the soul's journey through the waters of existence. In Mesopotamia, the god Awakens, half man, half fish, emerged from the sea to teach civilization its laws. In early Christianity, the ichthys symbol, two intersecting arcs forming a fish, became the secret sign of believers. This wasn't happenstance. It was the signature of the age itself, embedding its archetype into the myths, religions, and moral codes of the time. The Age of Pisces came carrying the vibration of compassion, sacrifice, and faith. It asked humanity to surrender to something larger than the self, to place trust in the unseen currents of divinity. Its spiritual heartbeat could be felt in the rise of Christianity, in the spread of Buddhism beyond India, and in the mystical traditions of Sufism and Gnosticism. Each called for devotion, for surrender, for finding meaning not in material dominance, but in service and inner awakening. Yet, as with all ages, Pisces bore a shadow. Faith, in its light form, inspires. In its shadow, it binds. The very symbols meant to free the spirit could be used to control it. The same archetype that inspired saints also justified crusades. The same waters of compassion that nurtured art, poetry, and healing could drown dissent and truth beneath waves of dogma. Pisces' domain over secrecy and mystery meant that much of the world's wisdom was hidden away in sacred vaults, accessible only to the initiated or the powerful. Historically, this age coincided with empires rising and falling, each weaving religion into the core of governance. The Roman Empire's adoption of Christianity transformed a persecuted faith into a political force. Monasteries preserved knowledge, but also guarded it from the masses. Across continents, spiritual leaders held sway over kings, and divine authority became the most potent weapon of all. But beneath the surface, Pisces planted seeds in the human heart. Seeds of longing for union, for transcendence, for something beyond the fleeting grasp of the senses. It taught humanity how to dream of paradise, even if those dreams were often manipulated. And in the ocean of this age, every soul learned to swim, sometimes with the current, sometimes against it, but always within its waters. The dawn of Pisces was not simply a change in the sky. It was the beginning of a spiritual curriculum that would shape humanity's inner landscape for 2,000 years. A lesson now reaching its final chapters as the horizon glows with the light of another age. Pisces carries within it a frequency that speaks to the softest and most luminous parts of the human soul. At its heart, the archetype is that of the compassionate healer, the one who feels the suffering of others as if it were their own. In this vibration, the barriers between self and other dissolve. What happens to your neighbor happens to you. What wounds the stranger in a far-off land echoes in your own chest. This deep empathy is the wellspring of Pisces' greatest gift, compassion that moves beyond sentiment and becomes action, tending to wounds both seen and unseen. In the Age of Pisces, compassion was not just a virtue, it was a spiritual path. Mystics, from Christian saints to Sufi poets, spoke of love as the highest form of worship, an alignment with the divine that transcended all divisions. Francis of Assisi walked barefoot through villages to embrace lepers. Rumi spun in ecstatic union with God. Bodhisattvas in the Mahayana tradition vowed to delay their own enlightenment until all beings were free from suffering. This was the light of Pisces, the belief that every soul's liberation is intertwined. Alongside compassion came the call to faith. In its purest form, this was not blind obedience, but a profound trust in the unseen. It was the courage to step into the unknown, believing that there is a deeper order, even when the surface is chaos. This faith fueled pilgrimages across deserts, inspired cathedrals that touched the heavens, and gave courage to those facing persecution. In the Piscean current, faith is the invisible bridge between the human heart and the infinite. a bridge built not from proof, but from surrender. Sacrifice was the third luminous thread in the Piscean weave. Here, sacrifice is not about loss for its own sake, but about choosing love over self-preservation. The archetype of the martyr emerged in this age, not as a grim inevitability, but as a symbol of ultimate devotion. Figures like Jesus, who offered his life for the redemption of others, or Mahatma Gandhi, who endured imprisonment for his vision of non-violent liberation, embodied this sacred willingness to give all for the sake of a greater whole. In Pisces' highest light, sacrifice is an offering at the altar of unity, a recognition that the self is never truly separate from the collective. These three currents, compassion, faith, and sacrifice, form the spiritual backbone of the Age of Pisces. They gave birth to works of transcendent beauty, acts of staggering courage, and a shared moral compass that, at its best, reminded humanity of its interconnectedness. And though the shadow of this age would twist these virtues into tools of control and division, their essence remains untouched, like pure water flowing beneath the sediment of history. Even now, as the world stands on the threshold of Aquarius, the light of Pisces continues to shimmer, an eternal reminder that the soul's highest purpose is not conquest, but communion. If the light of Pisces was the healer's touch, its shadow was the illusionist's veil. The same sensitivity that opened hearts to compassion also made them vulnerable to suggestion. In this shadow, faith became less about inner trust and more about surrendering discernment to external authority. The great religions of the Piscean age, while birthed from luminous intentions, often hardened into rigid hierarchies. Clergy, kings, and empires claimed to speak for God, turning the living stream of spirit into a guarded well, accessible only through sanctioned intermediaries. Illusion became the first weapon. Symbols of the sacred, the cross, the crescent, the lotus, were infused with power, but in the shadow, they were wielded as tools of allegiance. Spiritual narratives were edited, rewritten, and selectively preserved to serve those in power. From the suppression of Gnostic Gospels to the political convening of the Council of Nicaea, truth was not just interpreted, it was curated. In this way, entire civilizations could be guided, not toward self-realization, but toward obedience cloaked in the language of salvation. Control followed closely. The Piscean archetype's reverence for the unseen made people susceptible to fear of the invisible as well. Concepts like eternal damnation or karmic punishment were weaponized to keep the masses compliant. The idea of divine judgment shifted from a mirror for personal reflection into a cosmic surveillance system. Faith, once a liberating bridge, became a leash. When the unseen was claimed by the few, the many were taught to look outward for permission rather than inward for truth. Then came spiritual manipulation, the most insidious form of the shadow. Here, even genuine mystical experiences could be redirected to serve an agenda. Visions, prophecies, and miracles were filtered through the interpretive lens of those in power, ensuring that the interpretation aligned with the desired order. Those who challenged this were often labeled heretics, blasphemers, or agents of evil, silenced by exile, execution, or erasure from historical record. But the shadow of Pisces did not work only through institutions. It also lived in the individual psyche. The archetype's deep empathy could, when distorted, turn into self-sacrifice without boundaries, a martyrdom complex that kept people in cycles of disempowerment. Illusion crept into personal relationships, where spiritual ideals were twisted into tools for manipulation. Control could come from a charismatic figure, a community, or even one's own mind repeating internalized dogma. Yet even in its deepest shadow, the Piscean age carried seeds of awakening. For every truth hidden, there were seekers who found it in dreams, in nature, in unguarded moments of clarity. For every manipulation, there were mystics who broke free, keeping the flame alive for future generations. The shadow was real and far-reaching, but it was never absolute. It simply taught the soul a harder, sharper lesson, that discernment is as sacred as devotion, and that the heart's compassion must be guided by the mind's clarity. Long before the Aquarian age would arrive in full force, its first whispers began weaving themselves into the collective unconscious. These whispers were not loud proclamations, but subtle shifts, like the faint glimmer of dawn before the sun breaches the horizon. They came as moments of inexplicable clarity, as if a veil was momentarily lifted, showing humanity a new way of seeing the world. In astrology, this foreshadowing is natural. Energies of a new age begin seeding themselves centuries before the actual transition, blending with the waning archetype of the one before it. Historically, these first signals emerged during the late Renaissance and Enlightenment periods, when the strict spiritual monopolies of the Piscean age began to crack. The invention of the printing press in the mid-15th century was one of these Aquarian seeds, decentralizing knowledge, spreading literacy, and breaking the exclusive grip of clergy over sacred texts. For the first time in centuries, truth could travel faster than the reach of those who wished to contain it. This was not just technological progress. It was the Aquarian archetype in motion, liberation through shared knowledge, a collective awakening through open communication. The Age of Aquarius is symbolized by the water-bearer, not as a figure who hoards the water of life, but one who pours it freely for all. Even before its dawn, we began to see movements aligned with this symbol. Revolutions that sought equality, the abolition of slavery, and the recognition of universal human rights. Though these struggles were imperfect and incomplete, they reflected the undercurrent of Aquarian ideals pushing through the Piscean framework. Science and mysticism also began a strange new dance. While the Piscean age had largely separated the sacred from the material, the Aquarian current hinted at their reunion. Quantum theory, though centuries away from formal articulation, had its seeds in philosophical speculation about the interconnectedness of all things. Mystics and inventors alike began to sense that energy, not matter, might be the fundamental fabric of reality, foreshadowing Aquarius's deep link to both technology and spiritual consciousness. Cultural movements mirrored this shift. Artistic and musical expressions began to break away from rigid classical forms, experimenting with themes of individuality, freedom, and collective vision. Even the Romantic era's focus on the beauty of nature and the inner life hinted at the Aquarian impulse to reconnect the human spirit with the greater whole. Yet these whispers often went unnoticed by the mainstream, overshadowed by the still dominant Piscean structures of control. The Aquarian spirit at this stage was like an underground spring, flowing quietly, eroding old foundations, waiting for the right moment to burst forth. Those attuned to subtle energies, mystics, visionaries, rebels, could feel its presence. They spoke of a coming time when humanity would awaken to its shared destiny, when the water of truth would flow without gatekeepers. The earliest signs of Aquarius were not a sudden overthrow, but a patient infiltration of light into the cracks of the old world. And for those who sensed it, there was no turning back. The horizon had already begun to glow. from the moment the first star maps were drawn, Aquarius was known as the water bearer, not a bringer of oceans, but of living streams that nourish the mind and spirit. In the archetypal language of astrology, Aquarius is fixed air, a paradox of stability and freedom, holding a steady vision while inviting all into the winds of change. It embodies innovation, the courage to break with what no longer serves, and the deep knowing that humanity thrives when the walls between us dissolve. Ancient astronomer priests spoke of Aquarius as the one who carries the vessel of divine insight, pouring it into the collective so that no soul would thirst for truth again. This is the sign of inventors, visionaries, and those who dare to imagine futures that have never yet been lived. Its essence is freedom, but not the fractured liberty of selfish desire. It is the freedom that comes when each individual is honored and uplifted by the whole. In the Aquarian archetype, unity consciousness is not a lofty dream, but a practical necessity, like the air we breathe. And in the same way air invisibly connects every breath, Aquarius reminds us that our thoughts, actions, and energies ripple into the lives of others in ways we cannot always see. In the mythology of many cultures, the water bearer appears as the bringer of celestial law, a reminder that higher principles stand above the shifting rules of empires and kings. In the esoteric traditions, Aquarius is linked to the awakening of the crown chakra, the point at which the individual mind recognizes itself as part of a vast, luminous network. Here, knowledge is not hoarded but shared freely. In this frequency, inventions are meant to heal, systems are designed for cooperation, and progress is measured by how much light is brought into the lives of all beings. The mystics knew that when Aquarius rises, the barriers between science and spirit begin to dissolve, revealing that the laws of the universe are written in the same language as the laws of love. Yet, this archetype also challenges us. To embody Aquarius fully is to release the comfort of belonging to a closed circle, to risk the vulnerability of openness, and to trust that a new order can emerge from collaboration rather than control. It asks each soul to become a bearer of its own light, to pour into the world not what tradition demands, but what the heart knows is true. When the water bearer steps forward, humanity is invited into a new kind of tribe, one not bound by blood, nation, or creed, but by the shared recognition that we are strands in the same cosmic fabric. And as this age unfolds, the gifts of Aquarius will not be given all at once. They must be claimed, lived, and poured back into the vessel, so that the stream never runs dry. Every age carries its own light, but every light casts a shadow. And the shadow of Aquarius, though rarely spoken of in the optimistic visions of the new era, is as potent as its gifts. In the same way that the water bearer pours truth into the world, it can also pour detachment, reducing the warm pulse of human connection to cold streams of data. Where its light is unity, its shadow is technocracy. A world governed not by the heart, but by algorithms and impersonal systems that claim efficiency, yet quietly erode the soul. In the Aquarian shadow, innovation becomes an idol. Progress is measured only in speed, productivity, and control, while the deeper question of why we innovate is ignored. When Aquarius loses its spiritual compass, its visionary power can be co-opted by those who seek to centralize knowledge and decision-making under the guise of decentralization. Ancient prophecies warned of this inversion, that an age promising liberation could, in its early stages, birth an unprecedented form of control. Governance through data, surveillance, and manipulation of the collective mind. Astrologers have long noted that Aquarius is ruled by both Saturn and Uranus, a paradox of structure and sudden change. In shadow form, Saturn's influence hardens into rigid systems, while Uranus's radical energy fractures relationships and traditions too quickly for the soul to integrate. The result is a society that feels unmoored, bound together by digital networks, yet starved of the warmth of presence. This is the cold rationality of the shadow, the belief that human nature can be perfected if only enough information is gathered and analyzed, if only enough emotional noise is stripped away. But history offers warnings. The same technological advances that can connect us across continents have, in other eras, been used to monitor, predict, and even preempt human thought and behavior. Mystics across traditions have recognized that detachment, when unbalanced, becomes indifference. It is the space where empathy withers, replaced by an abstract love for humanity, while forgetting the living, breathing humans before us. The shadow of Aquarius does not shout. It hums quietly in the background, convincing the collective that the trade-off is worth it. Give us your data, it whispers, and we will give you order. Give us your autonomy, and we will give you safety. And for many, weary from the chaos of transition, it will sound like salvation. Yet, in knowing this shadow, we reclaim our power to meet it consciously. The truth is that the shadow is not an enemy, it is a teacher. It asks, will you let the mind serve the heart, or will you let the heart be edited out of the equation entirely? The answer will shape not just the age, but the soul of the humanity that lives within it. There is a moment in history when the river of time is split in two, when the old current refuses to release its grip, and the new tide has not yet claimed the full flow. This is the handoff of ages, and it is never gentle. It is a period where the archetypes of Pisces and Aquarius do not merely brush past each other. They wrestle, coil, and clash, each seeking to imprint their essence on the collective soul. Astrologers refer to this as the cusp, but it is more akin to a storm front, where the warm winds of an old paradigm meet the cold winds of the new, creating turbulence in every layer of society. In the final centuries of the Age of Pisces, its virtues of compassion and faith are still present, but its shadow, control through belief and power disguised as piety, has hardened. At the same time, Aquarius begins to rise, whispering of liberation, innovation, and truth without gatekeepers. The result is a paradoxical world, hyper-connected yet deeply divided, spiritually hungry yet distrustful of authority, yearning for unity but quick to fracture into ideological camps. The turbulence of this overlap is not accidental. Throughout history, transitions between ages have been marked by upheaval, often catalyzed by technology and belief systems colliding. The shift from Taurus to Aries was marked by the rise of warrior cultures and metallurgy. From Aries to Pisces, the emergence of global religions. Now, as Pisces yields to Aquarius, we see revolutions in communication, energy, and consciousness itself. But the old guard does not step aside willingly. Systems rooted in Piscean hierarchy, political, religious, economic, tighten their grip in the face of Aquarian decentralization. They amplify fear to keep the masses anchored in the familiar, even as new networks bypass their control. Spiritually, this handoff is felt as a splitting of timelines. For some, the Piscean call to surrender to a higher power remains the guiding star. For others, the Aquarian call to claim one's inner authority becomes irresistible. But both archetypes, in their pure form, are needed for balance. The danger lies in clinging to the shadow of one while rejecting the light of the other. Mystics speak of this overlap as a test, the threshold trial before entering a new cosmic era. It forces humanity to discern truth from illusion, unity from conformity, freedom from chaos. And perhaps most importantly, it challenges each soul to decide which current will carry them forward. Will you be swept away by the fading tide, or will you learn to ride the swelling wave? In this battle of ages, neutrality is an illusion. Every thought, every choice, every alignment adds weight to one side of the scale. The outcome is not predetermined. It is being written now, through us. In every great transition between cosmic ages, there is not just a shift in the stars. There is a war of ideas. When the light of one age begins to fade and the dawn of another starts to break, belief systems become the terrain, the weapons, and the spoils of battle. This is the spiritual battlefield, where doctrines are not merely teachings, but tools of control or liberation, depending on the hands that wield them. In the Age of Pisces, religion became one of the most powerful unifying forces in history, weaving vast networks of faith, morality, and shared myth. But as that unity began to dissolve into rigidity and hierarchy, those same structures became fortresses, guarding power rather than nurturing truth. The transition into Aquarius threatens those fortresses, not with armies, but with a flood of information. Aquarian energy thrives on transparency, decentralization, and the dismantling of intermediaries between the individual and the divine. For those invested in the Piscean structure, this is heresy. For those attuned to the new wave, it is liberation. And so, every message, every teaching, every sacred text becomes contested ground. Who interprets it? Who controls its distribution? Who frames its meaning? In this era of overlap, these questions are not academic. They determine the spiritual trajectory of billions. History offers countless examples of such struggles. During the Reformation, the printing press became a weapon in the hands of those who sought to return scripture to the people. In earlier times, oral traditions were suppressed or rewritten to align with imperial faiths. Now, the digital age is the latest battlefield, where algorithms decide which voices rise and which are buried. Truth can be amplified or erased with the flick of a switch, and so the war for the soul is fought not only in temples and churches, but on screens and networks. On the personal level, the spiritual battlefield is internal. The old age whispers of surrender to a higher authority. The new age calls for sovereignty of consciousness. These are not mutually exclusive truths, yet their shadows can be. In the shadow of Pisces, surrender becomes blind obedience. In the shadow of Aquarius, sovereignty becomes isolation and ego. The battle, then, is not to annihilate one side, but to integrate their light. Compassion without control, freedom without fragmentation. As mystics often say, the real war is for your attention. In the transition between ages, every moment you give to fear, distraction, or false idols feeds one current. Every moment you spend in alignment, discernment, and authentic connection feeds the other. This is why the battlefield is everywhere. In media, in conversations, in our choices of who and what to trust. The outcome is not decided in grand proclamations, but in the quiet daily decisions of billions of souls, each adding their weight to the scales of history. The ages may shift by cosmic law, but how humanity crosses the threshold is determined by the battles we fight within and around us. In every era shift, there are forces that cling to the power structures of the old age, not always out of malice, but because their survival, authority, or worldview depends on the familiar order. In the twilight of Pisces, these forces are both visible and invisible, human and non-human, institutional, and psychological. Some are conscious of their role, actively working to maintain control. Others simply perpetuate old patterns because they cannot imagine anything else. In the realm of institutions, the most obvious carriers of Piscean power are those built on hierarchy, centralized authority, and gatekeeping of spiritual truth. This includes certain branches of organized religion that have evolved into political empires, protecting their doctrines with centuries of tradition and the weight of divine legitimacy. Their structures were designed to channel faith through intermediaries, priests, bishops, imams, gurus, ensuring that access to the divine is mediated and therefore controlled. In the shadow of Pisces, such mediation is less about guidance and more about ownership of truth. Political and economic systems are also intertwined in this preservation. Nations whose identities are rooted in religious authority, or whose ruling class benefits from keeping populations obedient to sacred law, have deep stakes in resisting the decentralizing current of Aquarius. The Old Age favored unity through belief, which, when distorted, becomes unity through conformity. Those in power understand that when belief becomes individual, power disperses. The Pisces forces also exist within the cultural psyche. They are the inherited beliefs that bind people to the idea that worth comes from obedience, that salvation must be earned through an external savior, and that questioning authority is dangerous. Even without active manipulation, these ingrained narratives can keep whole populations aligned with Piscean shadow dynamics. Media outlets, educational systems, and even family traditions may unconsciously carry forward these patterns, framing the old age's values as eternal truths rather than historical phases. Beyond the human sphere, some esoteric traditions speak of non-physical intelligences, thought forms, egregores, or entities that feed on the emotional currents of an age. The Age of Pisces has been rich in devotion, sacrifice, and martyrdom energy. In the light, this energy can fuel compassion and transcendence. In the shadow, it can be harvested by parasitic forces that have no interest in humanity's liberation. Whether one interprets this as literal entities or metaphorical archetypes, the effect is the same. The longer the Piscean frequency is maintained, the longer these forces retain their influence. Ultimately, the persistence of the Old Age is not sustained only by its architects, but by the complicity, willing or unconscious, of those who participate in its systems. As long as individuals are afraid to step into direct relationship with truth, the intermediaries will remain. The real challenge is not to wage war against the Old Age, but to see through its illusions, to reclaim spiritual sovereignty, and to recognize that even the most entrenched forces lose their grip when the collective no longer feeds them. In this way, the battle is not won by destroying the guardians of Pisces, but by making their dominion irrelevant. Beneath the shifting constellations, there have always been those who move ahead of the stars, heralds, builders, and visionaries who carry within them the seeds of the new age. The Aquarius forces are not bound to a single place or institution. They emerge wherever the call for freedom, truth, and innovation rises above the static of the old order. Some come as inventors, pushing the boundaries of technology not merely for profit, but to dissolve the chains of scarcity and dependency. Others are spiritual pioneers, speaking a language that blends ancient wisdom with a fresh, unfiltered awareness of unity consciousness. Yet these forces do not act in isolation. They form subtle networks, often without realizing they are part of something larger. From grassroots movements to decentralized systems, From humanitarian initiatives to open source revolutions, the Aquarian current flows through every act that decentralizes control and returns power to the individual and the collective at once. It is an energy that values transparency over secrecy, collaboration over competition, and knowledge over ignorance. When you see leaders who seek to empower rather than dominate, who invite rather than demand, you are witnessing the pulse of Aquarius in action. But just as in nature, the new must sometimes disrupt the old to take root. The Aquarian forces are often labeled as rebellious, destabilizing, or even dangerous, not because they seek destruction, but because they challenge structures that have defined entire civilizations. To the guardians of the Piscean age, these changes can look like chaos. To those attuned to the future, they are the birth pangs of a more harmonious world. This transition is not purely about social or political reform. On a deeper level, it is a shift in the architecture of consciousness. Aquarius carries with it the archetype of the water-bearer, one who pours out the waters of knowledge to all without gatekeeping. This democratization of truth threatens any hierarchy built on withholding it. It is why ancient prophecies, from the Hopi to the Vedic texts, spoke of an age when all secrets will be revealed, and when humanity will no longer need intermediaries to speak to the divine. The Aquarius forces also understand that the coming age will be shaped by resonance more than rule. They seek to harmonize energy, to dismantle the illusions that separate human beings from one another, and to encourage the recognition that individuality and unity are not opposites, but complements. They plant seeds in art, science, spirituality, and even commerce. Seeds that carry within them the DNA of a freer and more conscious humanity. Still, the battle is far from won. These forces must move carefully, for the systems of the old age will resist until the very last moment. The question is not whether Aquarius will arrive. The heavens ensure that it will, but how smooth or turbulent the transition will be. And that depends on whether these heralds can awaken enough souls to stand in the new light, even as the shadows of the past fight to reclaim them. Across cultures and centuries, there has always been an undercurrent of voices warning of a time when one world would dissolve and another would be born. Some of these voices belong to mystics and poets, others to astrologers, prophets, and indigenous seers who read the sky, the earth, and the dreams of humankind. Their language differed, but their message was remarkably aligned. There would come an age when the structures of the old order would crumble, not merely because of human will, but because the cosmic clock had struck its appointed hour. In the cryptic verses of Nostradamus, we find fragments of such a transition. He spoke of upheavals, of floods both literal and symbolic, of a great shift in the power of nations, and of spiritual awakening hidden within turmoil. Many interpreters believe that his imagery, the water-bearer, the breaking of chains, the rise of new alliances, was a veiled reference to the movement from the Age of Pisces into the Age of Aquarius. Though his quatrains are layered in riddles, the pattern of collapse and rebirth echoes the astrological narrative. Yet Nostradamus was not alone. The Hopi elders have long spoken of the fourth world ending and the fifth world beginning. In their prophecies, this shift is not merely a matter of dates, but of a vibrational readiness. They tell of a time when the cobwebs will crisscross the skies and a dwelling place in the heavens will fall with great crash to the earth. Visions that eerily parallel our era of satellites, global networks, and fragile orbital machines. But beneath the imagery lies the same core truth. Humanity will be asked to choose between the way of fear and separation, or the way of unity and balance with all life. In the Andes, Quechua and Aymara wisdom keepers speak of Pachacuti, a turning over of time and space when the world is set right after a period of distortion. The Inca saw this as a recurring cycle, and many elders believe we are living through such a Pachacuti now. The distortions of the Piscean age, power hoarded, truth hidden, spirit bound in dogma, must be corrected so the Aquarian ideals of transparency, knowledge, and collective stewardship can take root. Even in the East, the Kali Yuga cycle of Hindu cosmology aligns with this transitional narrative. While Kali Yuga is the dark age of confusion and materialism, it is said to give way to Satya Yuga, the age of truth and harmony. Certain interpretations suggest that the precession of the equinoxes, which heralds Aquarius, is a cosmic signal that this long arc is bending toward renewal. What makes these prophecies powerful is not their exact timelines, but their converging symbols: water, light, renewal, revelation. These threads appear again and again, woven through traditions separated by oceans and centuries. They remind us that this battle between ages is not a war in the physical sense, but a collective rite of passage. The choice each soul makes in this time, to cling to illusion or step into awakening, determines how gracefully or painfully the prophecy is fulfilled. Since the dawn of human observation, the sky has been both a map and a message. During the transition between the ages of Pisces and Aquarius, the heavens themselves seem to mirror the struggle playing out within the soul of humanity. The great wheel of the precession of the equinoxes is the stage, and the constellations are the actors, slow, deliberate, and unfaltering in their movements. It is this celestial choreography that marks the handover between ages, and with it, the tension of two archetypes colliding. In the age of Pisces, the vernal equinox point lay against the backdrop of the constellation Pisces. This alignment, calculated by the gradual wobble of Earth's axis, a 26,000-year cycle, imbued the collective psyche with Piscean qualities: faith, devotion, sacrifice, and the shadow of illusion. But as the equinox point drifts closer to Aquarius, astronomers and astrologers alike observe a symbolic shift. The water-bearer now approaches to pour a new stream into the consciousness of the world. This transition is not instant. There is no single date. Instead, it is a liminal zone, a cosmic twilight where two ages coexist, each exerting its influence like opposing tides. Certain planetary alignments have acted as catalysts for this tension. The rare conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn at 0 degrees Aquarius on December 21st, 2020, was hailed by many astrologers as the formal heralding of Aquarian energies. Jupiter expands, Saturn structures. Together, they plant the seeds of a new order. Historically, such conjunctions in air signs have correlated with shifts in societal frameworks, the rise of new technologies, and movements toward collective governance. Yet the old Piscean influence resists, showing up as a pull toward centralized control, religious dogma, and the comfort of familiar hierarchies. Eclipses, too, have played their part. Solar and lunar eclipses occurring along the Leo-Aquarius axis in recent years have symbolically illuminated the dance between personal sovereignty, Leo, and collective integration, Aquarius. Each eclipse acts like a cosmic drumbeat, intensifying the energetic themes of the transition and pushing individuals to reconcile personal identity with the needs of the greater whole. Even the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, weave their signatures into the sky's unfolding story. Uranus, the ruler of Aquarius, disrupts and innovates wherever it travels, currently shaking the foundations of stability in Taurus. Neptune, ruler of Pisces, dissolves boundaries and reveals illusions, lingering in its home sign to amplify both the beauty and the deception of Piscean ideals. Pluto, god of transformation, has hovered at the threshold between Capricorn and Aquarius, tearing down the decaying structures of the old world to make space for what is to come. To the ancients, these alignments were not random. They were the language of the divine mind, speaking in orbits and angles, guiding humanity's evolution. In this war between the ages, the battlefield is mapped across the zodiac, and every conjunction, opposition, and eclipse is a signpost. The skies remind us that the battle is not merely down here among nations and beliefs. It is inscribed in the cosmos itself, and the outcome will shape the story of humanity for the next 2,000 years. The war between the ages is not only fought in the skies or through the shifting tides of culture, it is waged most fiercely within the human mind. Here, the battlefield is thought itself, and the weapons are perception, belief, and emotion. Those who understand how the mind works can steer entire populations without ever drawing a sword. This is the domain of mass psychology, where manipulation becomes an art form and control can be exercised invisibly. In the Age of Pisces, the architecture of thought control was largely built through religion, myth, and the slow shaping of narratives over centuries. Stories were repeated until they became unquestionable truths, and the fear of heresy or damnation acted as an invisible fence around the collective imagination. But as humanity steps toward the Age of Aquarius, with its emphasis on information, networks, and speed, these tools have evolved into something faster, sharper, and more insidious. The battlefield is now flooded with data, images, and voices, all competing for dominance over the mental landscape. Psychologists like Gustave Le Bon and Edward Bernays documented how crowds could be swayed by repetition, emotional triggers, and the illusion of consensus. Modern neuroscience has expanded on this, showing that human decision-making is often less rational than we believe, driven instead by dopamine loops, fear responses, and the need to belong. In the digital era, algorithms act as silent generals, curating the stream of content that shapes our worldview. Every headline, every notification, every trending topic becomes a subtle push toward one perception or another. The danger lies in how seamlessly these manipulations weave into daily life. In the Age of Pisces, the control came from centralized authorities, churches, monarchies, empires, who dictated what was acceptable to think and say. In the emerging Age of Aquarius, control is often decentralized, dispersed across platforms, influencers, and echo chambers that give the illusion of freedom, while still funneling thought along predictable paths. The narrative may appear to be chosen, but in reality, it is engineered through the careful placement of symbols, stories, and frames of reference. Propaganda no longer needs to declare itself as such. It can hide in humor, in music, in the rhythm of scrolling through a feed. It can speak through statistics stripped of context or through emotionally charged imagery designed to bypass critical thought. And in this war of perception, truth is not always what matters most. Believability is. Whoever can make their version of reality feel the most emotionally resonant will often win the mental territory. This is why the war in the mind is perhaps the most decisive front in the transition between ages. The archetype of Pisces thrives on faith and the surrender of reason, while the archetype of Aquarius leans toward intellect and the detachment of the observer. When these energies collide, the result can be mass confusion, the erosion of trust, and the rise of competing realities. In such a climate, the greatest act of spiritual sovereignty is the ability to step outside the current of manufactured thought, to recognize when an idea is your own, and when it has been planted in the fertile soil of your mind by unseen hands. The war in the heart is the most intimate battlefield of all. For here, the conflict between Pisces and Aquarius plays out not in the heavens, not in governments, and not in the media, but in the raw currents of human feeling. This is where love and fear, compassion and resentment, unity and division collide. And unlike battles of ideology or territory, the war in the heart is not fought with words or weapons, but with energy. In the Age of Pisces, the emotional signature was deeply tied to empathy, devotion, and sacrifice. Its highest expression was unconditional love, the kind that dissolves boundaries and sees all beings as reflections of the divine. But its shadow was emotional dependency, guilt, and manipulation through sentiment. Leaders and institutions learned that to sway the masses, it was enough to stir strong feelings, to make people feel part of a sacred cause, or conversely, to make them fear they would be cast out if they did not comply. This was heart energy used as a tether. As the Aquarian archetype rises, the heart's battlefield changes shape. Aquarius carries the energy of intellectual objectivity, unity through shared vision, and liberation from emotional bondage. But its shadow can harden the heart, replacing warmth with detachment and compassion with a cool efficiency. In this shadow, feelings are seen as obstacles rather than wisdom, and the heart is sidelined in favor of pure reason or technological progress. This polarization creates a strange tension in our era. Some are swept into a tidal wave of heightened empathy, while others retreat into an almost mechanical detachment, believing it to be clarity. This emotional and energetic polarization is not accidental. Just as propaganda can be engineered for the mind, emotional currents can be engineered for the heart. Media, politics, and even spiritual movements can be infused with either divisive anger or intoxicating compassion, depending on the outcome desired. And because humans are electromagnetic beings, literally radiating emotional frequencies through the heart field, these collective emotions can ripple through populations like unseen weather. Studies in heart coherence from the HeartMath Institute suggest that the emotional states we hold influence not only our physiology, but also the people around us, subtly aligning or clashing with their own fields. When the ages overlap, this heart field becomes a tug of war. The Piscean forces may try to pull humanity back into emotional dependency, playing on guilt, nostalgia, or the longing for a savior. The Aquarian forces may encourage detachment and self-sovereignty, sometimes to the point of isolation. Each side calls itself love, but the vibration it radiates reveals its true nature. And this is where discernment becomes the soul's weapon. To feel the difference between love that liberates and love that binds, between unity born of compassion and unity born of control. The war in the heart is not won by closing it to avoid pain, nor by keeping it so open that it becomes unguarded. It is won by cultivating a heart that is both soft and strong, capable of deep empathy without being manipulated, and of holding boundaries without falling into coldness. For when the heart stands in its own sovereignty, neither age can use it as a pawn. It becomes the bridge between the mind's clarity and the soul's wisdom, carrying humanity into the next chapter with both truth and tenderness intact. Beneath the surface of history, There have always been currents running deeper than the tides of politics, religion, or war. These currents are guided by those who stand unseen, orders, lineages, and circles of initiates whose mission is to protect the most dangerous treasure of all, the code of spiritual truth. They know that ages rise and fall, that empires fade, and that names change, but the essence of the code remains unaltered. It is the map of consciousness itself, encoded in myth, symbol, and ritual. To the untrained, these are quaint stories or strange ceremonies, but to the initiated, they are keys, and like all keys, they are guarded, for in the wrong hands, they could lock humanity in darkness as easily as they could set it free. Many of these orders trace their roots to the mystery schools of Egypt, the Pythagorean brotherhoods of Greece, or the tantric and yogic lineages of India. Their teachings were never meant for the masses, not out of arrogance, but out of recognition that unprepared minds can warp sacred truths into weapons. They watched the Age of Pisces rise, with its emphasis on faith and devotion, and quietly encoded their wisdom in art, architecture, and stories. The stained glass of cathedrals, the proportions of temples, the parables in sacred texts, all layered with hidden geometry, alchemical ciphers, and astrological clues. Some orders aligned with the light, seeking to prepare humanity for the inevitable turning of the cosmic wheel. Others fell into the shadow, using fragments of the code to manipulate, to consolidate power, and to bind souls in illusions. Across centuries, they have mirrored each other like two sides of the same coin, opposite in intention, but equally skilled in guarding their secrets. The Rosicrucians, the Knights Templar, the Sufi orders, the Kabbalists, the Tibetan Gagpas, each holding their own piece of the map, their own strand of the tapestry. As the Age of Aquarius draws nearer, these hidden orders have become more active. The light-aligned lineages see the opportunity for humanity to awaken to unity consciousness, to innovate in harmony with spirit, to dissolve the false boundaries of nation, creed, and race. They are releasing pieces of the code more openly, through books, through art, through whispers in unexpected places. Meanwhile, the shadow orders seek to hijack the same currents, embedding their influence in technology, media, and global systems. They know that if they can control the transition, they can shape the new age in their own image. This is why, in times of great change, symbols resurface in strange places. Why forgotten rituals suddenly gain attention. Why certain teachings, long hidden, emerge as if on cue. The code is stirring, and with it, the guardians and gatekeepers who have always watched from the margins. Whether they serve the light or the shadow depends on the alignment of their own hearts and on the vigilance of those who are waking now, sensing that behind the visible battles of our world, there is another war being fought in silence, in initiation chambers, in dreams, and in the soul's deepest memory. Across the turning of ages, there has always been a quiet war to decide which memories humanity is allowed to keep and which are to be erased. Entire civilizations have been reduced to dust, not only by the passage of time, but by deliberate acts of destruction. Acts aimed at ensuring that certain truths never survive into the next cycle. From the burning of the Library of Alexandria to the Spanish conquest's annihilation of the Mayan codices, we see a pattern. The erasure is not random. It targets the very knowledge that could empower individuals to navigate the cosmic shifts for themselves without dependence on priesthoods, rulers, or institutions. The Library of Alexandria is perhaps the most famous example. A storehouse of scrolls and texts said to contain everything from ancient maps of lost continents to treatises on consciousness and the stars. Whether destroyed in one catastrophic fire or over several waves of neglect and political purging, the outcome was the same: a silencing of voices that carried the science, spirituality, and cosmology of multiple cultures. Likewise, the burning of the Mayan and Aztec codices by Spanish friars erased not just historical records, but a complex calendar system deeply attuned to the cycles of ages, eclipses, and cosmic shifts. The fragments that remain hint at an advanced understanding of time as a living being, something dangerous to those who wanted linear, controllable history. This pattern is not confined to the distant past. In more recent centuries, teachings from the Gnostics, Cathars, and other mystical branches of early Christianity were condemned as heresy, their scriptures destroyed or hidden away. The Nag Hammadi Library, discovered in Egypt in 1945, offers a glimpse of what was lost: writings that speak of direct communion with the divine, the illusion of the material world, and the inherent spark of divinity in every soul. These were teachings that undermined the centralized authority of church and empire. Dangerous in any age, but especially in the transition between ages, when the collective mind is ripe for redefinition. What is erased is rarely the mundane. It is the knowledge that could make humanity self-reliant in its spiritual evolution. The maps of the afterlife, the laws of energy, the workings of the human mind and heart, when in alignment with cosmic rhythms. By removing these keys, the custodians of the old order ensure that the masses enter the new age disoriented, easily swayed by fear or false saviors. And yet, fragments always survive. Buried in the sands of Egypt, encoded in myth, whispered through oral traditions, painted into temples, and hidden in the symbology of secret orders, the erased teachings find ways to reappear. In this age of rapid communication and mass awakening, they surface again, not as pristine wholes, but as shimmering shards that, when pieced together by seekers, can rebuild the original vision. This is the unbroken thread that the old powers fear most, that even after millennia of suppression, the human soul remembers, and when it remembers, it cannot be controlled. Between the waning light of one age and the first rays of the next, there walk souls whose task is unlike any other. They are the ones who carry one foot in the world that is fading and the other in the one that is yet to be born. These are the guardians of the bridge, men and women, often unnoticed, whose presence anchors the transition. They move quietly, because their work is not about drawing attention, but about preserving the integrity of the passage itself. They can be found in every era of great change. In the final centuries of Pisces, they appeared as mystics, poets, philosophers, shamans, those who embodied the compassion and faith of the age, while refusing to be bound by its illusions. They learned the language of both ages, speaking in the symbols of the old so they could be understood, while planting seeds of the new in ways subtle enough to survive censorship or persecution. Some taught openly, their work remembered in scripture or song. Others passed their knowledge in the hidden circles, coded into stories, art, or ritual that could outlast the controlling powers of the day. The guardian's role is delicate. Move too quickly, and the bridge collapses, leaving the unready masses adrift in the chaos between worlds. Move too slowly, and the old order tightens its grip, suffocating the new before it can breathe. This is why these souls must understand the currents of both ages intimately, not just the ideals they proclaim, but the shadow they cast. They must know when to stand in the light and when to descend into the shadow to retrieve those still lost there. History hints at their existence through patterns. the teachers who refused to take sides in the wars of belief, the inventors who disguised revolutionary ideas in familiar forms, the healers who worked outside sanctioned systems but never lost compassion for those still within them, figures like Hypatia of Alexandria, who preserved ancient knowledge at the dawn of a new intellectual era, or the Andean Amautas, who wove pre-Columbian cosmology into Catholic festivals to keep it alive. In our time, they may be scientists speaking of consciousness as fundamental to the universe, or activists calling for unity without falling into the traps of ideological polarization. Guardians are rarely pure embodiments of either age. Instead, they carry a synthesis, a living reminder that no age is entirely to be kept or entirely to be discarded. Their presence keeps the transition from becoming a violent severing. They remind humanity that the bridge is not simply a structure between 2 points. It is a living path, walked step by step, with patience and vision. And perhaps their greatest gift is not in what they teach or preserve, but in what they embody. The truth that even when the stars shift and the myths crumble, there are always those who remember how to walk in both worlds until all can cross. For in every turning of the ages, the bridge is not made of stone, it is made of souls. Every great shift in the ages is marked by a series of trials, not just for individuals, but for the collective soul of humanity. These are not random challenges, they are archetypal tests, woven into the very fabric of the transition, designed to strip away what cannot pass through the gates of the new era. They arrive in many forms: personal crises, global upheavals, spiritual reckonings, but all serve the same purpose: to determine whether humanity can embody the consciousness the new age demands. One of the first tests is the trial of truth. In the Age of Pisces, faith was often placed in external authorities, religions, kings, ideologies. But as Aquarius dawns, the demand is for inner knowing, for a relationship to truth that cannot be outsourced. The trial of truth confronts us with a world awash in misinformation, propaganda, and carefully crafted illusions. It forces individuals to develop discernment, not merely believing the loudest voice, but learning to feel the resonance of truth in the heart. Those who cannot pass this test risk becoming pawns in the final plays of the old age's control. The next is the trial of unity. Aquarius calls for a recognition of humanity as one interconnected field of consciousness, but this is tested through extreme polarization. We are confronted with division across politics, race, religion, and ideology. Each side convinced the other is the enemy. The challenge is to see beyond the mask, to remember that every human being is part of the same great organism, even when their beliefs seem alien. The old age used division as a tool. The new age requires connection as a strength. Passing this trial means holding compassion without surrendering discernment. There is also the trial of stewardship. As the earth groans under centuries of exploitation, the Aquarian age demands a shift from domination to guardianship. We are tested on whether we can live in balance with our planet, restoring ecosystems, respecting the web of life, and using technology without severing our roots in the living earth. This is more than an environmental issue. It is a spiritual contract. Those who fail this trial risk carrying the shadow of exploitation into the new era, poisoning the very foundation it is built upon. Finally, there is the trial of power. In Pisces, power often flowed through hierarchy, kings, popes, emperors. In Aquarius, the call is for distributed power, for systems that empower the individual and the collective equally. But this shift is tested by the rise of technocracy, surveillance, and AI-driven control. The question becomes, Will we use the tools of the new age to liberate ourselves? Or will we allow them to enslave us in subtler ways? These tests are not pass-fail in a linear sense. They are ongoing initiations. Each moment of choice, each act of courage, each refusal to descend into fear shapes the readiness of the whole. And perhaps the greatest truth is this: the tests are not set by some distant judge, but by the deeper self of humanity. It is we who have written them into the script of the ages to ensure that when the new dawn comes, we are ready to walk into it as conscious co-creators, not as sleepwalkers. The cosmic drama of the two ages is not just written in the stars or etched into the timelines of civilizations. It is woven into the fabric of your everyday existence. The battles between Pisces and Aquarius are fought in the quiet spaces of your choices, in the subtle inclinations of your thoughts, and in the invisible weight of your habits. While the grand stage may feature governments, religions, and technological empires, the most decisive theatre of war is the inner life of each individual. Every day presents you with a choice: to live from the inherited programming of the old age, or to embody the emerging consciousness of the new. The Piscean current whispers through the voice of fear, urging you to find safety in familiar authorities, to seek validation through belonging to a fixed group, to define yourself through belief rather than being. It thrives when you avoid your inner knowing in favor of the comfort of consensus. It thrives when the mind seeks saviors instead of sovereignty. The Aquarian current calls you in a different way. It speaks through sudden intuitions, flashes of insight, the urge to break from patterns that no longer feel alive. It asks you to trust the quiet authority within, even when it contradicts what the world tells you. But this path is not without its dangers. The shadow of Aquarius can make you coldly detached, skeptical to the point of cynicism, or so enamored with intellect that you lose touch with the warmth of the human heart. In this way, the battlefield within is not simply choosing one age over the other, but discerning which qualities are true and life-giving, and which are distortions. You will feel this inner war in moments of moral choice, when telling the truth risks losing social approval, when following your calling disrupts the plans others have for you, when compassion demands you listen to someone you disagree with, or when fear tempts you to stay silent in the presence of injustice. Each decision becomes a microcosm of the cosmic struggle. Every thought that arises, whether rooted in love or in fear, is like a soldier on one side or the other. Even your relationship with time reflects this battle. The Piscean mindset clings to the past, preserving traditions whether or not they still serve. The Aquarian spark longs for the future, leaping ahead into what's possible. Yet the true mastery lies in anchoring fully in the present moment, where the power to shape reality resides. This is where the ages meet. Inside your breath, your awareness, your now. The secret is this: when enough individuals win their personal battles, the war in the collective begins to turn. The destiny of the ages is written not only in prophecy, but in the sum of millions of small victories in kitchens, offices, streets, and silent rooms where no one is watching. The sacred task is not to wait for the shift, but to live it, moment by moment, choice by choice, until the light of the new age is not just above us, but within us. The Age of Pisces may feel like a distant myth written in the stars, but in truth, its fingerprints are still on your soul. You carry it in your patterns of thought, in the way you approach love, trust, and suffering. Pisces was an age of deep emotion, of faith that often demanded surrender without question, and of compassion that could easily turn into self-sacrifice. Look closely, and you may notice how your instinct is to forgive too quickly, to give even when you have nothing left, or to place the needs of others far above your own. These are not weaknesses. They are remnants of an archetype that shaped humanity for over 2,000 years. Yet, in the light of Aquarius, they can become both blessings and burdens. The Piscean influence lingers in your belief systems, especially if you were taught to seek salvation outside yourself. Religions born in the Piscean era often place the divine in a distant heaven, accessible only through intermediaries. You may still feel a subconscious pull to look for authority figures, whether spiritual leaders, institutions, or even charismatic teachers, to define what is true. This reflex is the echo of an age that taught humanity that faith was most virtuous when it was unquestioning. In the Age of Aquarius, such faith must evolve, transforming from blind devotion into conscious trust grounded in personal experience. The habits of Pisces also appear in the way we handle illusion. This was an age ruled by Neptune's waters, where truth and fantasy often merged into the same current. Many carry an inner tendency to romanticize the past, to see suffering as a kind of spiritual nobility, or to escape reality through fantasy and idealism. These patterns were not born in you alone. They were embedded in the collective psyche over centuries, from the medieval mystic who sought God in a cloistered cell, to the poet who drowned their sorrows in verses and wine. Humanity was taught to navigate life through a lens of dreams and symbols, rather than the raw, unfiltered truth. Even in modern life, Piscean remnants reveal themselves in your relationship with boundaries. This age was about dissolving barriers, seeing all as one, merging with the collective flow. The beauty of this is empathy, the ability to feel what others feel. The challenge is knowing where you end and another begins. Without awareness, this can lead to being swept into emotional tides that are not yours to carry. Recognizing this is not a rejection of Pisces, but an honoring of it, taking the lessons of compassion without drowning in the ocean of another's pain. The question, then, is not whether Pisces lives in you. It does. The real question is, how will you work with its legacy in this time of transition? Will you let its shadow cloud your clarity, or will you distill its wisdom into something pure, something that can serve the awakening now unfolding? The old age shaped you, but it does not have to define you. And the moment you see its reflection in yourself, you gain the power to choose which parts of it travel with you into the light of Aquarius. The signs of Aquarius within you are often subtle at first, like distant chimes carried on the wind. You might notice them in the way you question long-held truths, not from rebellion, but from a deep, intuitive knowing that the surface of reality is only a fragment of the whole. Aquarius stirs the mind into seeking patterns, connections, and universal principles, pulling you toward knowledge that transcends dogma and into realms where spirituality meets science. This is not the questioning of a cynic, but the inquiry of a soul remembering its birthright to think freely and perceive without the filters of fear. You may find yourself drawn to innovation, not just in technology, but in how you live, connect, and understand the world. Ideas arrive like sparks, and you feel an urgency to share them, not to hoard them. Aquarius is the current of the collective mind, and when it awakens in you, collaboration becomes more important than competition. You begin to value communities built not on shared blood or geography, but on shared vision. Friendships form that feel destined, as if these are the people you agree to meet in this lifetime to build something together for the future. there is also a growing detachment, not from life itself, but from the illusions that once kept you bound. You start to see through the theatre of power, the staged conflicts, the narratives fed by media and institutions. Aquarius sharpens your discernment, helping you distinguish between what is constructed to control and what is emerging to liberate. This detachment is not coldness. It is clarity, the ability to step out of the storm and watch the clouds move from above. You may notice shifts in how you relate to time. The Piscean past often anchored people in nostalgia or prophecy, but the Aquarian awakening pulls you into the now, where the seeds of the future are planted. Your creativity flows in bursts, often guided by intuition rather than linear planning. You may dream more vividly or experience sudden flashes of insight, moments when the boundaries between your mind and the infinite feel thinner than ever before. The most profound sign of Aquarius stirring in you is the alignment of your inner compass towards service, not in the old sense of martyrdom, but in consciously offering your gifts to uplift the whole. There is a recognition that your talents, ideas, and energy are not just for personal gain, but for weaving into the greater tapestry of humanity's evolution. You begin to live with the awareness that every thought, every choice, and every act contributes to the world you are helping to build. When you see these patterns in yourself, curiosity without fear, innovation without ego, detachment without apathy, you are not merely adapting to a new age. You are becoming a living thread of it. The Age of Aquarius is not just coming. It is already here, flowing through you each time you choose truth over comfort, unity over division, and awakening over sleep. To disarm the darker aspects of both ages, we first need to recognize that neither Pisces nor Aquarius is purely light. Every archetype carries its own shadow, a distortion of its highest qualities. The Piscean shadow manifests as blind faith, martyrdom, and the surrender of personal sovereignty to external authorities. It is the dreamer lost in illusions, the seeker bound by dependency on saviors who never arrive. The Aquarian shadow, by contrast, emerges as cold detachment, hyper-rationalism, and the elevation of ideology over empathy. It can turn unity into conformity and innovation into control. Both shadows, left unchecked, risk enslaving the spirit rather than liberating it. Neutralizing these shadows begins with awareness, seeing them not as external enemies to be destroyed, but as energies within ourselves to be integrated. In Jungian psychology, the shadow is not eradicated, but brought into consciousness. This means admitting where we have clung to comfort over truth, or where we have wielded intellect as a weapon rather than a bridge. It is a process of self-honesty that requires humility and vigilance. One of the most effective tools is discernment, not suspicion that breeds paranoia, but the clear-sighted ability to sense when a teaching, leader, or movement is leaning into control rather than empowerment. In the Piscean context, discernment prevents the surrender of your inner authority to charismatic figures who promise salvation at the cost of your freedom. In the Aquarian context, it keeps you from being swept into rigid systems that prize efficiency and collective goals over the dignity of the individual soul. Spiritual practices that anchor both heart and mind can also dismantle shadow influence. Meditation helps you witness thoughts without fusing with them. Prayer or sacred intention keeps your values rooted in compassion, and self-inquiry clears the fog of inherited beliefs. The more balanced your inner world, the less susceptible you become to the manipulations of either age's darker forces. It is also essential to reclaim emotional sovereignty. The Piscean shadow thrives on emotional overwhelm, waves of guilt, fear, or longing that cloud judgment. The Aquarian shadow thrives on emotional suppression, convincing you to cut off feelings in the name of logic or progress. True mastery lies in the middle path, where emotion is honored as a guide but not allowed to dictate without wisdom. On a collective level, neutralizing these shadows means refusing to polarize. It is tempting to label the old as all bad and the new as all good, but this fuels the very duality the transition seeks to transcend. The wisdom of Pisces, its compassion, its mystical devotion, must be carried forward, just as the brilliance of Aquarius, its innovation, its global vision, must be tempered by empathy and reverence for the soul. Ultimately, the shadows of both ages lose their power when you refuse to serve them with your energy. By living in conscious integration, you become the bridge where wisdom and vision meet. And in that balance, neither the illusions of the past nor the cold calculations of the future can rule you. You stand free, luminous, and unshaken, a living testament that the new age can rise without the old one's chains. The outer world is never just the outer world. It is the reflection of the vast inner theater, where thought, belief, emotion, and energy dance in patterns too subtle for the untrained eye to see. The ancients understood this. Hermetic philosophy declared, "As above, so below, as within, so without." This was not poetry, but a law of the soul's environment. Every war, every cultural renaissance, every collapse of a system is a mirror held up to humanity's collective inner state. And in the time between ages, this mirror becomes polished to a blinding clarity. When you look at the news, you are looking into this mirror. Natural disasters echo the instability of the human psyche. Unprocessed fear, anger, and grief churn beneath the surface, like tectonic plates. Economic shifts mirror the redistribution of energy and attention, showing where humanity clings to scarcity or steps toward abundance. Political upheavals reveal the soul's wrestling match between control and liberation. The old Pisces impulse to be ruled and the Aquarian urge to self-govern. But the cosmic mirror does not just reflect the collective, it reflects you. That scandal that outrages you, that innovation that thrills you, that tragedy that cracks your heart open. These are not random sparks in the void. They are resonance points. They show you what is unresolved, what is calling for growth, and where your alignment with the energies of the new age is either strong or fractured. In Jungian terms, the outer world becomes a projection screen for the unconscious. What you resist with the most intensity may be something you have yet to face within yourself. And what you admire with deep longing may be the dormant potential waiting to be awakened. The mirror is neither friend nor enemy. It is teacher, always reflecting without distortion, even when we refuse to see. The most powerful way to work with the cosmic mirror is to become an observer before you become a reactor. When events unfold, whether in your personal life or on the world stage, pause, ask, what does this reveal about the current state of collective consciousness? What does this reveal about my own? If the event triggers fear, where in my inner landscape does that fear live? If it ignites hope, what inner truth does that hope affirm? Recognizing the mirror also means seeing through illusion. The war in the skies, the battles in politics, the floods and fires, these are real in their physical consequences, but they are also symbols. They carry archetypal meaning that points to the underlying spiritual shift. The Age of Pisces taught us through myth and mystery. The Age of Aquarius demands we read the symbols in real time. When you learn to interpret the cosmic mirror without denial or projection, you stop being a pawn of the reflections and become a conscious participant in the shaping of what appears. And that is the great secret. The mirror does not just reflect, it responds. Change the vibration within, and the reflection shifts without. In this way, the inner battle is never wasted, because every transformation you embody ripples across the glass of the world, reshaping the future that we are all about to enter. There are moments in humanity's story when the allies that matter most are not the ones who stand in physical form beside us, but the ones who move unseen. Threads of consciousness that weave into our lives like whispers from another realm. Across cultures and millennia, mystics, shamans, and prophets have spoken of these presences. Beings of light, ancestral spirits, guardian intelligences, and forces of nature itself that watch, guide, and sometimes intervene. The modern mind, trained to dismiss what it cannot measure, calls them myth. But in the liminal space between the ages, their presence becomes undeniable for those with the eyes to see. Some of these allies are what many traditions call ascended masters, souls who have walked the human path to its highest reaches and now operate from a higher octave of existence. In theosophical teachings, figures like Kuthumi, Serapis Bey, or the elusive Master Moria are described as guiding humanity's evolution subtly, never forcing, always respecting free will. They work through inspiration, synchronicity, and the placement of key insights in the minds of those ready to act. Their fingerprints are rarely obvious, but they are felt in the way certain ideas seem to arrive out of nowhere at just the right time. Other allies come from the earth itself, what indigenous traditions might call the spirits of the land. In the Andean cosmology of the Quechua, Pachamama is not just a poetic name for nature. She is a living intelligence, responsive to human offerings and capable of aligning or withdrawing her support. Likewise, certain rivers, mountains, and ancient trees are said to be keepers of wisdom, holding energetic memory that can be accessed in moments of deep communion. These forces act not as separate from us, but as part of the larger organism of which humanity is only one expression. Beyond these are the star-born allies, non-physical beings described in countless traditions as messengers from other worlds or dimensions. The Dogon of Mali speak of the Nomu, beings from the Sirius system who brought knowledge of the stars long before telescopes. In modern spiritual contact accounts, these allies often appear as energy signatures rather than humanoid forms, currents of thought and feeling that carry a resonance beyond the human range. While their motives vary, the ones aligned with the path of light work to help humanity remember its cosmic origin and destiny. In times of great transition, the veil between worlds grows thin. Dreams become doorways. Unexplained encounters, flashes of insight, and sudden waves of calm in moments of chaos may be signs that these unseen allies are near. They do not come to save us from our own work, but to strengthen our capacity to walk it. Their aid often arrives as a question more than an answer, as a nudge rather than a command, because the age we are moving into requires sovereignty, not dependency. The challenge is learning to discern their presence from the noise of imagination or the manipulations of forces less benevolent. This requires cultivating stillness, humility, and a willingness to be surprised. The allies you cannot see are not here to be worshipped, but to remind you of your own unseen self, the part of you that already knows the way forward. In recognizing them, you are not meeting strangers, but reuniting with family you forgot you had. The great revelation is not a thunderclap from the heavens, nor the sudden tearing away of a single veil. It is the moment when countless threads of truth long scattered and hidden, begin to weave themselves into a pattern visible to all eyes. For centuries, whispers of this transition have moved through prophecy, myth, and sacred text. Yet, until the alignment of cycles reaches its ripest point, humanity moves through life as if in a dream, only partially aware of the stage upon which it stands. When the great revelation arrives, the dream dissolves, the stage lights up, and what was once dismissed as esoteric, symbolic, or impossible becomes undeniable. This revelation is not merely about secrets being disclosed by governments or hidden archives flung open, though these may serve as catalysts. It is a deeper unveiling, a psychic and spiritual threshold crossed. Ancient prophecies from the Hopi to the Vedic rishis have spoken of a day of purification, or Kali Yuga's end, where the illusions that sustain the old age crumble under the weight of truth. The Hopi elders speak of a blue star that appears before the great purification, while Hindu texts describe a time when truth re-emerges after an era of darkness and moral decay. These stories may not all be literal, but they share a resonance, a collective recognition that we cannot go back. On a planetary level, the Great Revelation coincides with unprecedented transparency. Digital technology, once a tool of control, becomes an instrument of exposure. Lies spread quickly, yes, but truth moves like lightning once it strikes the collective mind. Celestial alignments, such as the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius in December 2020, have already marked shifts in the air, signifying structural breakdowns and the infusion of new paradigms. In astrology, such convergences are seen as signposts, pointing toward the inevitable dismantling of obsolete systems and the birth of more interconnected frameworks. Yet, the Great Revelation is as much inward as it is outward. It is the moment when an individual's private awakening merges with the public awakening. The symbols that once spoke only to the mystic suddenly speak to millions. The hidden battle between the forces of Pisces and Aquarius is no longer perceived as a fringe idea, but as an observable reality manifesting in politics, economics, art, and even the weather of human emotion. For some, this will feel like liberation, the confirmation of what their soul has always known. For others, it will feel like the ground has been pulled from beneath their feet. In this liminal space, humanity will be called to decide how it meets truth, with fear or with courage, with clinging or with release. The Great Revelation does not guarantee the outcome. It simply opens the eyes. What we do with what we see will determine whether we step into the Age of Aquarius as conscious co-creators or as reluctant passengers. And in that choice lies the real test. For revelation without transformation is just another story. It is transformation that turns the seeing into becoming. Crossing the threshold into the Age of Aquarius is not a sudden leap, but a passage, a collective rite of initiation that has been centuries in the making. Humanity stands at a symbolic doorway, one foot in the fading light of Pisces, and the other reaching into the uncharted radiance of Aquarius. In ancient mystery schools, initiation was never about acquiring new beliefs. It was about transformation. The candidate would be stripped of familiar identity, tested in the dark, and reborn into a deeper reality. Now, that process unfolds on a global scale. Every society, every culture, every individual is being drawn into the initiatory chamber of this cosmic transition. For many, this threshold is marked by a growing sense that old structures no longer hold. Institutions that once felt eternal, religions, governments, financial systems, crack under the weight of their own contradictions. The Piscean model, built on hierarchy, blind faith, and centralized authority, is dissolving, even as its remnants struggle to hold power. In its place, the Aquarian current rises, emphasizing interconnectedness, personal sovereignty, and the flow of truth beyond borders. Astrologically, this shift is amplified by transits such as Pluto's entry into Aquarius, a placement that has not occurred since the late 18th century, a period that also birthed revolutions and redefined human rights. But initiation is never comfortable. To cross the threshold is to face the guardians of fear, doubt, and resistance. Collective initiation demands that humanity confronts the shadow it has long ignored. The environmental wounds inflicted on the Earth, the technological forces that threaten autonomy, and the divisions seeded by centuries of manipulation. These are not just challenges. They are the trials that determine whether we emerge awakened or fractured. Like the trials of the Eleusinian mysteries or the initiations of ancient shamans, the tests are designed not to punish, but to refine. On the personal level, crossing this threshold often feels like an internal dismantling. The beliefs you inherited from family, culture, and tradition may no longer fit. Relationships that once defined you may dissolve, and old ambitions may lose their taste. It is here that the Aquarian qualities of clarity, detachment, and vision begin to awaken. In the initiation chamber of the soul, the seeker learns to trust inner knowing over external decree and connection over competition. The great paradox of this passage is that while it feels deeply personal, it is also profoundly collective. The same patterns unfolding in your life are reflected in the news headlines, in the shifting tides of global consciousness, and in the quiet revolutions of countless hearts. Crossing the threshold into Aquarius is not about escaping the world. It is about re-entering it with new eyes, carrying the blueprint of a different future. And once that passage is crossed, there is no return to the old ways, for the vision of the new age cannot be unseen. It calls us forward, not as isolated individuals, but as a chorus stepping into the song of a higher era. To live as a bridge being is to stand with one foot in the fading current of Pisces and the other in the dawning light of Aquarius, not rejecting either, but embodying the wisdom of both. This is not a position of indecision. It is one of deep synthesis. The bridge being understands that every age carries gifts and shadows, and that true mastery lies in weaving them into a balanced whole. From Pisces comes the legacy of compassion, devotion, and the recognition of the sacred in the unseen. From Aquarius comes the call to sovereignty, innovation, and the vision of humanity as a connected organism, not a hierarchy. Walking this path requires the patience of a mystic and the adaptability of a visionary. It means not clinging to the old because it feels familiar, nor leaping into the new simply because it feels revolutionary. Instead, the bridge being moves with discernment, carrying forward the soul's deep understanding of unity from Pisces, while releasing the illusions of blind faith and dependency. They welcome Aquarius's liberation of thought, yet remain cautious of its potential for detachment without empathy. Throughout history, certain individuals have served as living bridges during transitional epochs. Figures like Hypatia of Alexandria, who fused classical philosophy with emerging scientific thought, or Hildegard of Bingen, who married mystical vision with practical healing, were embodiments of this archetype. They were translators between worlds, preserving the treasures of one era while planting seeds for the next. Today, such individuals emerge across disciplines. Healers who integrate ancient herbalism with modern medicine, technologists who design AI with ethical and spiritual principles, and teachers who speak both the symbolic language of myth and the empirical language of science. The bridge being is also a mirror for humanity. They carry within themselves the contradictions and tensions of the ages, often feeling like outsiders to both. This is the initiatory cost of their role, belonging everywhere and nowhere, until they realize that their home is in the connection itself. In living this way, they help others cross. By embodying compassion without passivity, intellect without arrogance, and innovation without severing roots, they become living proof that the old and the new can coexist without destroying each other. Practically, this means cultivating the Piscean heart while sharpening the Aquarian mind. It means embracing stillness and contemplation even as we learn to navigate the speed and complexity of the modern world. It means resisting the polarization that demands we choose between tradition and progress, spirit and science, community and individuality. The bridge being stands as a reminder that these polarities are illusions, two ends of the same cosmic river. To live as a bridge is to accept that your very life is an act of translation, a living passageway between what has been and what is becoming. And in this position, you carry something precious, the assurance that the wisdom of the past need not be lost, and the promise that the dreams of the future need not be rootless. The bridge is not a compromise. It is a sacred joining, where the soul of humanity can walk freely into the next age without leaving its heart behind. There comes a moment when the illusion of separation between yourself and the greater conflict dissolves, and you understand that the war is not only outside you, it is within you. The battle between the fading tides of Pisces and the rising currents of Aquarius is not merely an abstract cosmic event. It is etched into your thoughts, your choices, your fears, and your hopes. You are not standing on the sidelines watching history unfold. You are the very terrain upon which it is fought. Every doubt you entertain, every truth you embody, every shadow you avoid, and every light you embrace becomes part of the field where the ages clash. This truth can feel overwhelming. The mind wants to believe the real struggle lies in governments, systems, or celestial shifts beyond your reach. But the deepest layer of this transformation is an inner war for sovereignty. The Piscean shadow whispers for you to surrender your discernment to authority, while the Aquarian shadow tempts you to sever all bonds in cold detachment. The battle is not about choosing one age over the other. It is about integrating the gifts of both while refusing their distortions. And because you carry traces of each, your very being is the meeting ground where this integration must happen. The mystics of every tradition have understood this. The Sufis spoke of the greater jihad, the struggle within the heart, as the most important war a soul could ever fight. The Bhagavad Gita framed the battlefield of Kurukshetra as an allegory for the inner fight between duty and desire, truth and illusion. Even the desert fathers of early Christianity retreated into solitude, not to escape the world, but to confront the forces inside themselves that mirrored the outer chaos. Their lesson is clear. The outer age cannot fully change until the inner age within each person has shifted. When you accept that you are the battlefield, the war changes. It becomes intimate. Every time you choose compassion over judgment, you disarm a weapon of the old world. Every time you speak truth in the face of manipulation, you weaken the grip of illusion. Every act of courage, every refusal to participate in fear, and every moment of self-honesty tips the balance. These choices ripple outward in ways you may never see, but are always felt. And perhaps the most profound realization is this: being the battlefield means you are also the bridge to peace. The battleground is where wounds can be healed, where reconciliation can occur, where the old and new can meet in harmony. The scars you bear from this struggle are not signs of defeat, but of initiation. They mark you as one who has stood in the storm without turning away. You are not a passive witness to this cosmic story. You are the page upon which it is written, the ground upon which it is decided, the living altar where the ages meet. When you claim that role fully, you move from being a pawn in history's game to becoming its co-creator. And in doing so, you realize the war was never about destruction. It was about remembering who you truly are. And now, as we close this journey together, take a deep breath. Let what you've just heard settle into your heart. Because if these words have reached you, you are already part of the awakening. This is not the end. It is only one step in a much greater remembering. So here's what I want you to do next. If this message stirred something inside you, even if you can't explain why, watch more of our videos. Each one is another piece of the map, another doorway into the truth that's been waiting for you. Subscribe to this channel so you don't lose the thread of your own awakening. Leave a comment, share what resonated, what you felt, or the signs you've been seeing. Your voice matters more than you know. Like this video if it lit a spark in you. And share it with someone who needs to remember that they too are part of this shift. Because the age is changing, the veil is thinning, and the more of us who awaken together, the faster the darkness loses its hold. This is your invitation, your calling, your moment to step deeper into the voyage. I'll see you in the next video, traveler. Until then, stay awake, stay sovereign. And remember, you are the battlefield, and you are the light that wins. Welcome to the Hidden Voyage. Welcome home, SoulWhisper and SoulCreator. The Hidden Voyage